Seal Beach, California. Nice Saturday afternoon in the summer. Why am I here? This house holds the answer. Hi, I'm Phil Turek, and in this episode I'm going to try to explain why it is I've selected that house out of all the houses in the 47th district to stand by today. Alright, stay tuned. In the future, there will be a vibrant, self-sustaining human civilization on Mars. The high road to Mars is one built on a foundation of gracious professionalism, the bedrock ethos of the first robotics competition. The earthbound dreamers of today, who are working to open the high road to a future Martian civilization, are the ancestors of tomorrow's Martians. I'm Phil Turek, one such ancestral Martian. Look at what I'm trying to do by creating simulated Martian cultural ambassadors to act as positive social influencers to somewhat depolarize society here in the United States. Imagine how much even better it would be if the United States were to bring real Martian ambassadors here. Hi, everyone. So here we go. Season 2, Episode 20. The Fate of a Cult. Oh, my goodness. What have I got? First definition from the internet. A cult can be a religious or semi-religious group, unusual, extreme practices and beliefs centered on a particular person, object, or goal. Could be manipulative. All right, so that's a cult. But it did go on to say there could be, like people who really are fans of a particular movie, like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. They're a cult for it, so it's kind of a gray area. What are the key characteristics again from artificial intelligence? Frequently operate under one leader who demands unquestioning obedience. Okay, so that's a key characteristic of a cult. Another thing is you have to have a specific set of beliefs and practices that you must adhere to, and might be isolated from information, outside information restricted, and friends and families cut off, so that that's being in a cult. So basically, generally a bad connotation with the word. So, what are some examples of cult leaders? And basically, from my point of view, you can divvy them up into one of two categories. Okay, I'm going to classify cult leaders. Either they believe that he himself, the leader, is the chosen one. Okay, so here's a list of examples from that. Adolf Hitler. And you can Google it like I did. Each one of these people on this list felt that they were the chosen one, selected by our divine being to execute their will. So Adolf Hitler is very famous, and he was imagining creating the Third Reich, that, the Aryan race is going to wipe out the Jews. Okay. Charles Manson, maybe a little less famous to you guys, from the 1960s. He had a cult following that went and murdered some people. I think he's still currently in jail. The Reverend Jim Jones. Now, that made a big impact on the national psyche here. So He ended up taking his followers and isolating them in the jungles of South America, French Guiana, I believe. And when the gig was up, when a congressman flew in to the little airport there to investigate claims that it was a cult and that one of the family members of a constituent was being held there or was there, he was killed at the airport. And that triggered a panic reaction from Reverend Jim Jones. And so they executed a plan that they had in place for such a situation where they all lined up, all more than 900 members of his group, and they took some grape flavored Kool-Aid and laced it with cyanide, and they all committed suicide all at once. And there's a tape recorder that they had running, recording all this, and it gets kind of eerie because the batteries eventually died over the duration it took for people to such a large mass suicide to take place. David Koresh, more recent. So Jim Jones, I think, was like 1980s. David Koresh was in the 1990s. And there was a joke once about, guess who gave up, guess who stopped smoking? Oh, David Koresh. So he had his cult following in Waco, Texas, that led to a fire and death. Marshall Applewhite, a little less famous, but there was a comet that came by in the 1990s, and his he and his followers believed that that's the spaceship coming to take our souls away. So they had to leave their bodies behind and committed suicide. Okay, so each one of these, I would say, cult leaders creates this insulated bubble of their own self-reality. They have their followers within it. And if that bubble gets burst with too much contact with reality, then it's deadly to the people who were in that bubble and potentially deadly for people who have burst the bubble. Okay. So, but not all cult leaders believe that they are the chosen ones. So there's the second category, people who think they're not the chosen one, but they are still cult leaders. And I decided to add Martin Luther to this list because he's famous from history for having started a religion, Lutheranism. Okay. Now, he didn't think he was the chosen one, hence he's in this category. William Miller, an obscure name from history for you guys. He was a Union Army officer in the early 1800s. His first major engagement of, I think, the War of 1812. American forces were severely outnumbered, and yet they won the battle, and he felt that that was a result of basically divine intervention. So he ended up deciding, interpreting calendars as predicting the date of the second coming. And didn't apparently happen on the predicted date, so we had to, reschedule. Didn't happen on that date, reschedule. And what happened was that became the Millerite religion, which today has evolved into the Seventh-day Adventist, if I understand it correctly. So he created a religion. And then L. Ron Hubbard, haha, you might poo-poo his name on this list. He was an author. I read his Battlefield Earth book, but he's also the person who created the Church of Scientology. Now, you could argue it's not a cult. I've had one interaction with them where I personally felt my independent will was being severely assaulted. Like they wanted to control me, induct me into their cult. So, from my point of view, Church of Scientology is a cult, and therefore it is on this list. But L. Ron Hubbard didn't think that he was the chosen one. He was just basically a writer. So there you have it. And there are no known female cult leaders, as far as I know, who wants to listen to women, right? Oh boy. Oh boy. So, or women are just more rational and wiser than men who get into this sort of stuff. That's more correct. So, two classifications for cult leaders. If you believe you're the chosen one, either way, you live in this bubble, right? But if you believe you're the chosen one and that bubble becomes burst by contact with reality, it leads to death and destruction. If you're not the chosen one, then when that bubble, well, even though it's in contact with reality, it just evolves into a religion. Interesting, right? Interesting. So here's the big important question. What if MAGA were a cult? And I left the rest of the slide blank. And here, just take a minute and think about that. What if it were a cult? So, a reminder about the slide, what are the key characteristics of a cult? Authoritarian structure. I think we can all recognize who the leader is of MAGA, who demands unquestioning obedience. That was a criteria for being admitted into cabinet positions uh, in this administration. You had to swear loyalty to the leader, not to the Constitution. And you had to, okay, doctrinal doctrinal rigidity. You had to have a specific set of beliefs. In this case, you had to, swear that the 2020 election was rigged. Oh, yeah. It was an attempt to overthrow the 2020 election by the Democrats. Now, the reality is, it was a Republican candidate who really tried to overthrow the 2020 election. But doctrinal rigidity says, no, you believe that it was the Democrats who were trying to rig the election. Yeah. No evidence ever presented to this day. And all the investigations carried out by competent people showed it was the safest, most secure election in U.S. history. Oh well, facts. In isolation and control, you could argue that no, MAGA doesn't have any isolation from outside information. However, they're self-isolating, okay? So back in 2016 at Thanksgiving, okay, think about this. We just had a national election, and Thanksgiving is when extended family gets together, and if politics comes up, well, okay, it's handled in a civil way. But in the 2020s, in the 2016 Thanksgiving, families were divided and polarized so strongly that they broke apart. And so self-isolating from family. You stop listening to your daughter who's telling you that you're in a cult. You stop listening to your friends and neighbors, your other family members. And then you restrict your sources of outside information. Interesting, but the term fake news, whenever I hear it, I interpret that as mean, oh, this is news they're reporting about that fake person, huh, who keeps claiming that the news about him is fake news. Well, it's news about a fake person. So it's just a play on words that he's using. Anyways, there's a particular news network station that is just pro North Korean propaganda style in support of dear leader. And I think you know the name of the station. And then some people just restrict themselves to that's their information source, or the one by Steve Bannon, or there's a very small information ecosystem, and it's just self-restricting. If they turn the channel to CNN, the mainstream guys, instead of being persuaded to ignore them, they would have a different view of what's going on. So consider this. If MAGA were a cult, is their leader someone who believes they're the chosen one? Or is their leader someone who does not believe that they are the chosen one? And what's disturbing is the MAGA leader has said he's the chosen one, but he says a lot of things. So another way to assess which way he goes is to consider the adage, you know, what people want. The three things are to plant a tree, build a house, raise a kid. Okay, those are all things directed towards the future. And the way our current leader behaves is consistent with someone who doesn't really plan for any future after his own time. Uh, Example would be social security system. It is now projected that with the results of the big, beautiful bill, it will become insolvent in 7 years, maybe 8 years from now. But that's beyond, see, that's not a future thinking uh, behavior, right? So shooting the messenger from a few days ago who reported lower than rosy job report. Okay, shooting the messenger, figuratively shooting the messenger so far. Uh, that's consistent with someone who doesn't care about reality and the future. So there's some evidence here that implies that if you want to consider MAGA to be a cult, then its cult leader is someone who appears to be in the category with the others, the longer list instead of the shorter list. And so, what will happen if reality burst into that bubble based on what happened to everyone else on that long list? There's going to be death and chaos associated with that. And the thing that makes this particular member of that list, allegedly or hypothetically, is that this member has access to an entire nuclear arsenal, the largest, most deadly nuclear arsenal on the planet, at least currently. And if it's someone who doesn't care about anything after their own lifetime, are they going to be like, like so many of those other leaders who decided if their lives are ending, their followers should go with them and maybe take out everyone else, but certainly the followers. Whew, wow, that's a scary thought. All right, let's move on. There was the No Kings protest where like 2,000 different groups registered at this one website saying they're going to have a protest. Well, this last Saturday, August 2nd, 2025, there was a follow-on type of protest rally. Only 400 groups registered at the website for that one. And the first one, my wife and I went to Huntington Beach Pier, and there were lots of people there in favor of the protest. This time, I went to Seal Beach Pier for a reason I'll get into, and it was much smaller. When I got there about 45 minutes after the rally started, I counted a little over around 2 dozen people. And then a few more came like me and a couple left. So when one person said there were like 40 people there, I would say, yeah, okay, just scraping on 40. But yeah, 40-ish people there. So here's a sign, from one person there. And then I decided to do the cheesecake sign with that person. Now, when I first, read her sign and saw her, I thought, isn't she the one who was the pro-Trump over to Huntington Beach Pier, but I guess I'm confused. And also, her signage is crossing out the word people and leaving and replacing it with the word billionaires. And to me, that sounds like, she's in favor of the MAGA crowd that's in support of billionaires. But no, she's there. Um, and there I am, wiped into 10 on this one. What do I want to say? Here, next slide. I'm going to play this video clip, and I spoke with this guy a little bit. So don't have a picture of his face, just the back of his head as he goes up and down. But I would claim him to be a professional leader slash agitator. That's a little strong word. So speaking with him, he had been involved with unions and had led rallies for 20,000 union members. He's gone around to different places. I remember he mentioned Temecula to participate in these rallies. And in this little clip here, let's just play it.
Immigrants are welcome here. No hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcome here. No hate, no fear. Woo! Yeah!
Okay, so there's an example. He's created the chant, no hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcome here. And it has to have a cadence and be something that people can chant. This is too small of a crowd to really sustain it much, but he had several different chants that he initiated. Okay. And that's something I've been knowing that, is useful to have at rallies is to have a chant that has a cadence to it and has a strong message that's simple to share. Uh, okay. So that's one of his. And you can see it wasn't that big of a crowd. In Huntington Beach, no kings, I would say like one out of every three cars was honking on their horn in support of us and people thumbs up and such, and recording us using their cell phones from the passenger seat as they drove by. At this event in Seal Beach, much more subdued, much less prevalent support. It's a smaller crowd, so you don't have as much time to decide if you're going to support it before you are driven past it. But I would say I count it as high as 20 cars would go by before the next car honked. But the median value would probably be like 5 to 7-ish. So sometimes, it'd be like almost every car would honk and support. Also, there was more aggressive clashing between those who were supportive, particularly with the signs, and those who were opposed, particularly in the cars. Okay, and it was like the woman in the image here. Okay, if there was someone who expressed support from their car for the current administration, she would lash out at them and say, "You're a pedophile." Okay, so much more confrontational and not what I view as being useful or influential at all. Uh, hmm. Now I think I have at least one more clip to share with you from this. Next slide. No? Oh, can I back up? How do I back up? This looks like the same guy again, right? Yeah, okay. So I only did one clip with this. He had multiple ch chants. And I just wanted to add one more thing about him. I would not want this guy to be on my team. If I had to put together a team to support me with what I'm thinking of doing, this guy is knows the law well, knows the boundary of what he can and cannot do very well, but he pushes to that line. He doesn't go over it. He goes to it assertively. And so another an opponent got into a verbal clash with this guy. Okay. And later, well, he was going the crosswalk because, you have 30 seconds to cross the street with the crosswalk. And during that time, you can carry your signs in front of the cars that are waiting for the light to turn. And he would do that. Uh, on one such crossing, someone got, and at least I think it was during the crosswalk, uh, someone elbowed him. Actually, I should go with the elbow, right? Elbowed him. Okay, so physical contact. And there were plenty of witnesses, and the police were nearby, anyways. So the guy who elbowed him got into trouble with the police. But this guy here, I don't. Okay, he's good at rallying the troops and is a natural leader and knows how to be assertive. But I think to make the changes that need to be made, this isn't who I would pick if I had to pick, a team. All right, yeah, let's go on. So there's a opinion article in the New York Times. This is from Michelle Cottle, Cottle. Title is It's Completely Unappealing Why the Senate is Broken, published April 4th. And I'm just trying to summarize some interviews with people who are choosing to leave the United States Senate. Why are you leaving the United States? Oh boy. Okay. So, among other things, a lot of people are bailing out because everyone is so extreme now in the polarization and in the division. It's shirts versus skins, which is how we play our pickup basketball games here. And you're on one or the other, and you're all in for just winning. There's none of this professional, um, gracious professionalism that I keep talking about. And so, if you're a moderate, you leave and you get replaced with someone who's not a moderate. And that makes it harder for the remaining moderates to feel like sticking it out and trying to fix things. So the Senate is in bad shape, and the House of Representatives is equally in about the same state. Okay, so that's from the article. Also from the article, interviewing again senators who are choosing to leave the Senate. The rise of social media is basically crushing independent journalism, crushing, you know, and separately from that, campaign financing, the rise of the super PACs has made it where things are not functioning anymore. So I asked AI to generate an image representing this, and I guess you could say the chains are what bonds us together as one indivisible nation, and social media is what's breaking those bonds that unite us. Wow. Okay. Another observation from that same interview, and it was in the New York Times, talked about how it's so easy now for a member of the Senate to just quietly tell their leader of their party, "Oh, I want to oppose this bill, as a filibuster," and then they go home for the weekend at least. Whereas here's a photograph from the old days when if you were going to do a filibuster, you had to actually be physically present, and for as long as you talked, the filibuster was in in effect. So you had to put some skin in the game, as they put it in the article. And people don't do that today. When you did do a verbal filibuster, if someone chose to sit there, they would hear your point of view. Now, when a filibuster is taking place, you don't have to be present. You don't have to have the slightest awareness of anything they said. Okay, so that's a potential for reform to the Senate. Okay, campaign finance could be reformed. Independent journalism could be encouraged. You should support it. That's the government just shut down the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Ah, wow. So going the wrong way right now. One more comment from that article. Again, this is interviewing senators who are choosing to leave the Senate or have already left. And they said the people who throw rocks are the ones who get cheered on and rewarded. The people who are actually trying to solve the problems, they're not cheered on, they're not rewarded, they're basically shunned for trying to fix things. So here's an AI generated symbolic representation of that. Not too bad, although it looks like the guy's throwing the rock at the head of the person who's trying to solve the problem while he's being cheered on. Anyways, this is referring to the influence of social media and extremists on both sides in Congress. So you have, the two main political parties with extremists who are loggerheads who feel that it's shirts versus skins. What happens to the moderates? They're basically just about extinct. Mm. Okay, so I began this episode in Seal Beach. Why there? What's going on? So, less than a week ago now, Thursday of last week, guess that's the last day of July, on our local ABC news station, they had this little clip here. It was like 2 minutes, 30 seconds. I've stolen it and trimmed it down to just the essential points. So, listen to this.
Trump has been able to get much of his agenda passed so far thanks to Republicans holding a majority in Congress. But will that change come midterm elections?
Eyewitness News reporter Josh Haskell here with a look at how Democrats hope to flip some California seats. Josh.
In just 10 months, California voters will head to the polls for the 2026 primary as control of Congress will most likely run through California again. If Democrats hold their current seats and flip three, they'll have a majority in the House. Republicans are also on the offensive in California.
We were looking to pick up the seats that we lost in 2026. We're looking to pick up Dave Min, Derek Tran, and Adam Gray. So those are the seats that we lost by just a razor-thin margin this last cycle. We are taking the model that was used in Florida to flip Florida from a purple state to a red state.
All right. So, based on that,
President Donald
I remind you that Dave Min is my representative. I live here in District number 47 in the state of California, and it's one of three districts specifically being targeted by Republicans to flip it to help them maintain a majority in the House of Representatives. And if you follow current events, you know the state of Texas is, oh boy. So the governor of Texas brags that, we Texans are independent and we're like football team coaches and we don't, losers are the ones who try to blame things. Like 130 people died in a flood, and he made a comment about how it's the losers who try to fix the blame, and we're all on the same team, and sometimes we have uh, hmm, I forget the exact wording, but the point is now the leader of MAGA is fretting about losing, and instead of trying to fairly win votes, they'd rather go with the other option, which says, let's gerrymander the district a bit more so that we can pick up more Republican seats so that MAGA can continue controlling the federal government. Okay, so out here in California, they're targeting my particular district as uh, something to pick up. Now, this is a map of what my congressional district looks like. And I'm going to pause this for a moment and switch to, actually, I don't have to pause it. Here, just work with me. So instead of showing my PowerPoint, I'm going to go to the website that actually contains this. Okay, so I should be able to mouse this in now. Here is District 47 in the state of California. And if you zoom in here, this is Seal Beach. Oh, that's how this episode began, in Seal Beach. And this is Pacific Coast Highway, and here's the pier. This is where a rally was along Pacific Coast Highway and Main Street, but I'm bringing you into Ocean Avenue and saying, look at the very last house here, 100 Ocean Avenue, Seal Beach, California. That is, well, I can't say one of the corners of the district, but this is a polygon, and this is one of the vertices of the district, okay? So I decided, what's what's it like? What do the homeowners in this area feel about politics right now? So that house, which I photographed from this park where it's green, uh, so being actual extroverted in the real world is not something easily done for me by me when I'm not invited in. Okay, if I'm invited in, maybe, but so I decided I was going to knock on this first door, this first house of this first street in the district. When I got there, after the rally, I drove over there, knocked on the door once, no answer. The side gate was open, so I could have gone in maybe to see someone. I didn't dare. I did linger in the area. And so what happened was I eventually struck up a conversation with one of the neighbors. And the neighbor informed me, well, that house there, they've held parties in support of Scott Baugh, who was the Republican candidate for this district in the last election, so Dave Min's opponent. But the person I spoke with struck me as being a very decent human being who, like me, feels dismay that families have become divided over politics, that what MAGA is doing is not good for the nation. This neighbor told me about how there's a guy on Main Street in Seal Beach. She has a swimsuit shop, and for fun, he has all this pro MAGA stuff in his store windows, and he records the reactions of the passersby and makes money posting their reactions online. So, finding the humor in being offensive, I guess, to some people's sensibilities. So I went there, and if I could pick a person to be on my team, I would pick that neighbor. So I know where they live. I don't know their last name. I know their first name, but that they're a decent human being. Okay, so there's a decent human being who lives there. Uh, and so the next day I decided, well, this polygon has many shapes to it. And by the way, these are all pretty ritzy houses here from my standard of living, right? They're along the San Gabriel River and the Pacific Ocean, and it's Southern California. So go figure. And this is the Orange County line. And so here's the district. So here's another little vertex. And I decided, okay, what's the nearest house to this vertex here? And I zoomed in and I decided it was right here. So on Sunday, the next day, I decided I'm going to drive over here because I had an errand in Long Beach and walk up and down this street and see if I can find a neighbor to talk with about politics and get some advice. Turns out this neighborhood is in Leisure World, which is a retirement community that is gated. and I had no uh, business passing through the gate to go, bother people. So that's off my list. But look here, this is a little stub that sticks up by the freeway, and I've never been here. But Sunday, I drove over here, and this neighborhood is all named after different colleges and universities. So Loyola and so on. So what I did is I targeted the very end of this little neighborhood right here. It says Harvard Lane, the house at the end of it. I said, okay, I should go knock on this door, this house, and see what the political climate is like there. Okay. Uh, I did not dare actually knock on the door of that house. I did walk the entire length of Harvard Lane, though. Not sure how far that was. Uh, saw people, saw an old guy, oh, around here. There was an old guy sitting in the driveway in his car, passing driver's side, door open. He had a cane. He was reading some paperwork. I didn't want to go off the sidewalk because I feel like I'm intruding into your private property if I step onto your driveway. So I called out to him several times over several minutes, and occasionally he kind of picked his head up a little bit, but he never turned around to look back to look at me. So that's as far as I got um, there. Okay, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint slide. I don't know. I'm going to stop sharing and then share that again because I'm not sure if it switches. Sorry. So let's go back to the PowerPoint slide, share, and next slide. Okay, here's a picture of that house, by the way. So I was there. There was a couple boxes of free books on the sidewalk from one of the other houses, and I brought home the book, very thick, picture type book, holographic pictures of called Safari. So it was a bunch of children's books. What's the point of all this? Logically, I should think, maybe, I don't know, think about trying to run for Congress. Here in Orange County, or maybe California, the top two vote getters in the primary advance to the general election. So you're not restricted to having just one candidate from a political party. Therefore, it's, you know, I only have to be second highest vote getter in the primary to advance to a general election coming up next year. I called up the Orange County vote registrar's office and they said, use this candidate handbook from the 2022 cycle because the one that will be coming out on December 11th is will be based on this one and just tweaked up and updated. Yikes. So that's the scary news. Uh, and then there's today's article where, again, from some liberal uh, article, they referred to the cadet prayer at West Point, and an excerpt from that goes, make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half truth when the whole can be one. Yowzers. Okay, no need to share anything else. That was the last slide. And this is the issue. I'm not a public person. I'm not a politician, I should say. One woman at the rally next to me, I would pick her to be on my team. support. The neighbor that I spoke with in Seal Beach at that first vertex, I would pick as support. If I had to classify myself, which I guess I'm going to have to do, I would say I'm one of those nearly extinct or trying to trying to come back from extinction, moderate Republican, uh, but I'm kind of idealistic. So an idealistic, moderate Republican trying to figure out what would that be? Moderate idealistic Republican, MIR. That's the Russian word for peace, the Mir space station. Maybe I should adopt that. So instead of being a rhino, I'm a Mir. I'm I'm peaceful. Uh, I know these videos I'm recording have almost zero audience views, zero, one person, 1 week. There was an anomaly a few weeks ago where 61 people viewed one of these videos in a week. I would need, my wife kind of doesn't want me to spend my own money trying to run for Congress. And there's a $1,740 entrance fee to register as a candidate. Or you can uh, get a bunch of signatures on a petition, and each signature is worth about 58 cents. So if you go out and get 3,000 signatures, uh, the filing fee is waived for that one item. The paperwork becomes available December 11th. So like the petition forms. And then February 6th, I think, is the opening of the window for where you can file formally as a candidate for the primary election coming up in June. So I would be starting from true zero. I could not bring myself to knock on a door uh, at that nice little college area, Harvard Lane. Couldn't do it. Only knocked once on the door at the first vertex in Seal Beach, but I encountered a neighbor who I would put on my team. This is scary. This is the last episode of season 2. I guess the the thing that's makes this very weighty is what if MAGA really is a cult? And what if their cult leader is someone who feels they're the chosen one? What happens when that bubble is burst against reality? So I could choose the easy or wrong instead of the hard or right. It's not my style. Uh, as season 3 gets underway in a couple of weeks or so, I might attempt to just make my own little 30-second spots about what's my platform? What do I stand for? Uh, as if I were making my own campaign commercials. I could try that. I know one thought I already have. How does it go? So, for immigration reform, I mentioned last episode the idea that a person, and I would now say who's been here for at least 7 years, illegally in the country, they're an immigrant, they've been paying taxes, they don't have a bad record, maybe a minor infraction, I don't know, parking ticket, don't know. But if they've been here for 7 years or longer, then if they have 3 letters of recommendation locally, so let's say a coworker, not a boss, a neighbor who's unrelated to the work, and a city council member, which are pure MAGA in my city, but okay, city council member. I don't know if you want a fourth one from a religious leader, but if they have those 3 letters of recommendation and they keep their nose clean, then they can renew staying legally in the US for another 7 years and then need to update it in 7 years. So there's an idea for immigration reform tacked on to House Bill HR 3599 from the year 2023 that had 38 co-sponsors, including 8 Republicans, 30 Democrats. So that's something I would advocate if I were in Congress. Another idealistic thing I would toss out there is when I work as a teacher, I have to go through annual training about a long list of things about how to be a good teacher, but how to legally comply with state laws about child abuse and sexual harassment and, legalese. The same thing was true when I worked as a poll worker for the Orange County Register of Voters. I had to go through training. Same thing, sexual harassment and legal requirements. Politicians maybe should go through not what I would call legal training like that for sexual harassment. Maybe they already do that. But I'm thinking more like I want them to break down the barriers that were mentioned in this article by Michelle Cottle. So one way of doing that is a version of the first robotics competition, but it can't be like that exactly. First has a ethos of gracious professionalism, where your team partners in an alliance with another team against two opponents who are partnered together. And then later on, things get switched up. So who had been on the opposition is now on your side, your alliance. And it helps the participants break down the idea of it's us against them, it's shirts against skins. It's more like we are striving to do the best of completing our task. And if the opposition is stumbling because they don't know how to do something or they have a hardware failure, we're not going to laugh in their faces. We're going to offer to help them, build them up so that they can do the best that they can do at what they're trying to do, complete the same task. Okay? So for Congress, finally tying back into my Mars project, where I'm trying to have a simulated Martian settlement on Earth that germinates desirable Martian cultural values derived from the American nations. Maybe have new members of Congress go through an alliance building activity where they try to say, okay, we're establishing a legislative body for a Martian government. Okay, work with me. And as an exercise, you have to propose a bill, a legislation to address whatever the issue is. Sure, immigration reform, pick something. And it's a competition where other participants are the other political party in this Martian uh, political space. And you present your bills and it gets scored. And maybe this takes place on a Saturday every other week for maybe a month at the beginning of a congressional session for members of Congress who choose to participate, right? And after the scoring at the finals, and again, we have the gracious professionalism ethos that says, okay, that political group, small group of Congress people, they were on the opposition party, but now they're on your alliance party. Okay. So it's not just two political parties in shirts versus skins. It's here's a little group, maybe 4 people. I don't know. Here's another little group, and you're in an alliance with them. And then later on, maybe the same political issue, maybe a different political issue, but now you're not in alliance with them. And at the end of this maybe 4 Saturdays session, if you are a certificated um graduate of this experience, listen to this. Within the certificated graduating participants, you exchange a vote token with a member of an opposition political party in the real world. So if you're, you know, Democrat, Republican, or independent, you've gone through this experience based on first. And in the real world, at the end of it, you're going to exchange one vote token, let's say, with a member of another political party, which says, that vote token says, yes, you will have my vote on one issue of your choice, and maybe have a constraint that says it has to be, this congressional session, and you have the right of refusal twice. So they say, okay, I want your vote on bill, pa, 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 pa. And you say, no, not that one. I pass. And then on a different bill later, they try again to use your vote token. You say, no, okay, but that's it. And then third bill that comes along, yes, they get to use your vote on their legislation, even though maybe you wouldn't have voted for it. And that makes it a bipartisan bill, even though right now political parties are so polarized, there's no value apparent to them in bipartisan legislation. However, as it's been pointed out in the historical records I read, the things that make the United States great are the things that we agree upon, not the things that we fight over. Okay. So there's an moderate, idealistic Republican thought. If I were to run for Congress, that's an example of the thinking that I would bring to bear. And the other characteristic I would bring to bear is stoicism, I guess you have to call it. I'm not I'm not naturally inclined to hatred. I'm not naturally swayed towards hating a group of humans for one characteristic or another. Uh, when I was a teacher, the secretary at our school once labeled our teacher mailboxes with uh, identifiers of who we are. And so for the science department, we were all big into Justice League. So one teacher was labeled as, like uh, Superman. Another one was Batman. For my mailbox, she wrote Spock because I tend to be not very emotional. Okay. And you have to be that way when you're dealing with vile hatred. Hatred is contagious, and hatred feeds upon hatred. So if you go to a town hall and you're being bombarded with hatred, the proper response isn't to hate back, but to be stoic and endure it. That's a pretty long episode this time. This is the end of season 2. Food for thought. Two thoughts, right? Is MAGA a cult? If so, what would be the end of that cult? Would it become a religion, or would it become self-destructive in a really big way? And then the second thing is, for me personally, Phil Turek do I seriously attempt to run for Congress? Bye. Okay, here's a little afterthought. So thinking about Mir, I came up with meerkat. It just seemed like the natural modification to make to it. And so what does that stand for? How about I'm a moderate, idealistic, Republican citizen against tyranny. Meerkat. Not to mention, cute, adorable, intelligent, sociable. Yeah, all those great features that I need to be. So if I had to pick a political mascot to represent who I am, I don't like the idea of being a rhino or an elephant or a donkey. I will go with being a cute, lovable, sociable, intelligent meerkat.